We're joined right now by phone by Larry Cafero. He's a House Republican leader. Larry Cafero, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, John. It's good to be back.
So we were talking with Ben Barnes and Keith Phaneuf earlier about these income tax increases going into effect right now. You've had some concerns about this, obviously, from the very, very start. What's your take on income taxes going up for the wealthiest Connecticut residents right now?
Well, no, it's going up for everybody right now, not just the wealthiest. That's part of my concern. You know, we keep talking about the income tax because it's the topic right now, and that people are finding out that their paychecks are being depleted even more because we're going retroactive to January and we're collecting 12 months worth of taxes in 5 months. But that's only one part of it, John. We found ourselves, back in January, in fact, frankly, for several months prior to that, in a dire economic strait. We haven't created jobs. People were hurting. And what the governor and this administration decided to do was to tax at the most historic level in the history of the state of Connecticut, $1.8 billion, $300 million of it going to cities and towns, and $1.5 billion to the state coffers. And you have to take the cumulative effect of all those things that have gone on, in addition to the other policies that we passed, such as paid sick days, et cetera. And it has had a devastating effect and will continue to have a devastating effect on our Connecticut economy. You read every day in the paper of yet another company doing business in Connecticut laying off workers. If you go out and you talk to the 70 or 80% of small businesses that might not pay a corporate income tax but pay their taxes through personal income tax and LLCs, et cetera, they are hanging on by a shoestring. They're hanging on by their fingernails. Many are going out of business. We've lost 15,000 businesses in the last 2 years. 100,000 people are out of work, 9.2% unemployment. And to add on top of that an increase in every single tax we pay, in my opinion, was the wrong route to go.
Well, one thing, though, as people look at the long history of what's been happening in Connecticut, as you just mentioned, we haven't created jobs for a very, very long time. We haven't created jobs for maybe decades under a different set of tax policies. I guess I'm wondering why we would necessarily need to lay at the feet of the Malloy administration the blame for not creating new jobs or not getting the economy of the state going when we haven't created jobs for the course of the last 20 years using different tax policies.
Well, first of all, we didn't use different tax policies, except I guess the biggest change was the income tax when it was created in 1991. We've had the same tax policies. We've just keep increasing them. And I would not be so unfair as to lay the blame at Governor Malloy. He was just elected and took office on January 5th. However, he did promise a new way, a different way, and I would argue that for the past 36 years, the Democrats have been in the majority in both the House and the Senate, those tax policies really haven't changed. It's just more of the same. We still have an income tax. We have a corporate tax. We have an estate tax. We've just increased them all. I have to take issue with due respect to Ben Barnes saying that they avoided hitting the property tax. They directly increased the property tax right off the bat. In fact, the only tool, John, that we've heard about, with all the hubbub about property taxes all these many years, the only thing we've ever done for our tax-paying citizenry with regard to arming them against the property tax was a property tax credit against their income tax. And prior to Governor Malloy taking office, that was a $500 credit that you could deduct dollar for dollar, $500 worth of property taxes you paid to your municipality against your state income tax. He proposed eliminating all of it. That's an immediate $500 increase to people who pay property tax. It ended up that he cut it by 40% from $500 credit down to $300 credit. That's directly out of the pockets of Connecticut taxpayers. That was their only weapon against property taxes, and he took away 40% of it. Also, to say that we had a measured and balanced approach, it's August 8th, folks, August 8th, and we still live in a state that does not have a budget, that is uncertain, that we are waiting for the vote of a handful of state employees that will determine the destiny of this state, whether or not we lay off people, whether or not we cut services, etc. This is a very, very uncertain time. So let's not pretend that we had to put in all these taxes to get us on solid, stable fiscal footing, because we're not on that. And it's August 8th, by the way. and with regard to feeding the beast, and Ben Barnes knows this, and we talk in what I call government doublespeak a lot. We didn't decrease spending; we increased spending by over $1 billion, approximately $1 billion over 2 years. So, when people hear that, when they heard about sacrifice, say, "Wait a minute, who's sharing here? Who's sharing here? You increased state spending, and you've taxed us $1.5 billion more, and you took away the one tool, 40% of the one tool we had to fight property taxes."
We're talking with Larry Cafero. He's a House Republican leader, and we're going to get to some of your phone calls in a moment. And as Ben Barnes said earlier, Larry Cafero, look, compared to what other states are doing, like New York, that really are pushing it down to the municipal level, Connecticut is indeed holding the line on these things.
Well, first of all, I take some issue with him saying that I'm being disingenuous. Let's just remember that the people who pay local property taxes are the same people who pay state property taxes. So the ECS comes out of state, it's not property tax, state taxes. That's where it comes from. Revenue, taxes, state taxes, income tax, property tax, etc. So you either pay out of one pocket or you pay out of the other pocket, but it's the same set of pants you're paying out of. It's the same checkbook. So the other tools that we wanted to give to fight against increased property taxes was mandate relief. Unfortunately, my good friends on the other side of the aisle rejected every single call for mandate relief to allow cities to get out of some of these unfunded mandates that we've heaped upon them, that they would argue causes them to increase property taxes.
Another report that came out in the last week or so, there's a lot of stuff about taxes, and that's why we're talking about it today here on Where We Live, that suggests that our state's business taxes are actually the lowest in the country. And I'm going to read a little bit from your article here. It says, the survey prepared for the Council on State Taxation found that while its neighbors imposed tax burdens that range between 4.3 and 6.2% of gross state product, the $22.9 billion that Connecticut businesses paid represented just 3.3% of the state's economic output. The national average was 5%. I keep hearing we're a high-tax, high-cost state. Cafero, if you could quickly just respond to this study. I'm sure you took a look at it.
Well, yeah, I did. But look, I'm not an academician, but I live in the state of Connecticut. And all I know is that if you go up to 75% of the businesses, many of whom employ far fewer than the large corporations we think about, and you showed them that, you think they would say, "Oh, I got it all wrong. Geez, I thought this was an expensive place to do business. That's why I haven't created jobs. That's why I've downsized."
But if it's really, I just have to ask, if it's really about the overall cost of doing business, that doesn't suggest that it has to do with what taxes the state is imposing. And that's really the political question that we're trying to grapple with a little bit here today. It's not necessarily about state taxes driving the jobs away. It's about all the other factors. It's a high-cost place to do business.
Well, exactly, but taxes are a big part of that formula. Your taxes, the cost of energy, the cost of gasoline, the cost of labor, it all adds up. And all I know is that that report flies in the face of about 9 other reports that say that Connecticut is one of the most business-unfriendly states in the United States of America. Period. End of story. And you don't have to take my word for it. Look at the facts. We haven't created a net new job since 1989. Our unemployment rate is 9.2%. Businesses are closing their doors. We just lost, in the last 2 months, almost 9,000 jobs in the state of Connecticut. Is that because we have a low business tax rate? No.
Larry, can I jump in with a quick question, though? Wouldn't you agree that you can pretty much go to any constituent group, residents, businesses in any state in the country, and if you ask them if their taxes are too high, you'd probably be hard-pressed to find a half dozen people who say, no, they're really good. I mean, isn't that generally the reaction whenever you poll people?
Sure, but we're not talking about polling people or people's reaction. We're talking about the facts. The facts are we're not creating jobs. We're losing businesses. That's reality. That's not opinion. That's not a poll. That's reality.
But hey, Fred, you're on Where We Live.
Well, I'm sorry I haven't heard the whole program, but I did hear some of the discussion about the credit for the property tax against the state income tax. I think people should understand that that's probably the most foolish tax policy we have in the state of Connecticut. It sends, first of all, what it does is it actually increases federal income tax liability because virtually everybody who can claim that credit itemizes on their federal return. So we ended up sending under the old formula the $500 credit. We actually sent about $160 million to Washington, D.C. Because of the higher liability. The other point is that it actually accomplishes no socially beneficial outcome. It doesn't help anybody really pay their property tax because you have to pay state income tax in order to get the credit, and the people who need help are not the people who are paying state income tax. So it's one of those incredibly foolish. I understand it's wonderfully politically popular because you can say, oh, we've done a nice thing for you. But in point of fact, it's a very bad policy. It accomplishes nothing. It sends more money to Washington, D.C. That we should be keeping here in the state, and we really need to restructure our tax policy. Abolishing it would have been a very, very good step.
Fred Carstenson's a professor of economics at the University of Connecticut. Thanks, as always, Fred, for your phone call. Very quickly, Larry Cafero, a response?
Well, yeah, first of all, I don't know how $200 or $500 in someone's pocket doesn't help somebody. And by the way, there are many people that pay state income tax that need help. And if that was not the case, I'm interested to hear Mr. Carson's opinion on the earned income tax credit, where we have working people who do not pay any income tax, for whom we are going to write a check to, taxpayer dollars. If his theory is correct with regard to the property tax credit, well, then it must be correct with regard to the earned income tax credit, because who's it helping? So listen, I don't have half the knowledge on economics that Mr. Carson has, but I do have some real life experience talking to a whole lot of people, and there's a lot of people out there paying state income tax that are going to sorely miss an extra $200 in their pocket because we have cut the property tax credit towards that income tax.
Larry Cafero is a Republican. He's the leader of the House Republicans, and I appreciate you joining us once again here on Where We Live. Catch up with you again soon, Larry.
Thank you so much.